today? This is what the reality of that was, but Jesus was saying, or he's about to say, that effectively there's some longing in our DNA, there's some longing inside of each of us that is meant to be fulfilled in him. That's where the source of real worship is. There's something inside of us that longs for that mountaintop experience, so to speak, with him. But in him, there is no guilt. In him, there is no shame. In him, he is the true bride. We're not cheating. We're out there. We're loving on him in the way that we were created. And because we're loving on him in that way, it becomes a river of living water that bursts true worship in our lives. Everything else is a distortion of that worship that leaves us coming back for more, that causes us to spend more than we want, that causes us to do things that we never thought we would do, always leaving us in the same place of guilt and shame, trying to fill some source of comfort or joy or pleasure or security or cover up some kind of a fear. Let's read on in what he's talking about. Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty. It will become a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Please, sir, the woman said, give me this water, then I'll never be thirsty again, right? Then he turns the conversation on a dime. It seems almost out of context. Go and get your husband, Jesus told her. I don't have a husband, the woman replied. Jesus said, you're right. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the one you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth. See, there was a distortion of worship that was going on in her life. She was searching for love in all the wrong places, and their love is standing before her to bring her truth and life so that she doesn't have to find life in the arms of these men. She went from man to man to man, hoping to find true love, and it was elusive, and it left her wanting more. It left her going out there ashamed in the middle of the day, hiding from people because of the conversations that others were having around her. Sin is like that. Sin deceives. Sin keeps us in a place of hiding. Verse 19, the woman said, you must be a prophet, so tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshiped? Finally, something starts to click in her head. And it comes back to this issue of worship. How did she get to a place of worship from him calling her out on her sinfulness? See, God has a way of doing that. When he uncovers those areas in our life that aren't in alignment with his word, one of the two things can happen. We could either harden our heart to that, and we could go on living in that way. And ultimately, most of us who have tried that, we found that very unfulfilling. We found it having to take us deeper and deeper and deeper into those things that are not of him, or we could find him as that bubbling source of life. So she begins to ask about, where must we worship? She talks about these mountaintops, right? Remember where I shared about the mountaintops a little bit earlier? What happens is we are all in some way looking for these high places. We're all in some way looking for these mountaintops that represent something to us: comfort, power, security, covering of our fears, pleasure, you name it. There's these mountaintops where we think true worship lies, and we go after them with our time, our talents, our treasures, our resources. We go after those things seeking worship. We don't call it that, but it really is at its core worship, and it's very elusive because real worship is only found in him, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Let's go back to our conversation for a moment about finances and look at it through the lens of consumeristic society. All of life in the natural and marketing in our society cries out that life is all about you. Will this product, this service, this relationship, this experience satisfy your wants, your needs, your desires? If it does not, in society, you look to another place. You choose a different restaurant, but they set it up in our minds to try to they don't call it worship either, but they try to tug on your heart about this place of identity, this place of comfort, this place of power, this place of pleasure that's only supposed to be fulfilled in Jesus. Let me give you an example from my own life, an example why I have to think about obedience in the area of finances so that other things don't become worship distortions in my life. I'll use an example of a vehicle for you as a means of demonstrating this. And somebody came up to me after the service earlier, and it was just great. It fit right with the situation he finds himself in his life right now. But think about how the American dream for many males has been equated with the vehicle in which they drive. Man, you go back even to the 50s, and there were songs about the cars. They would have, my 409, the Chevy 409, all these different songs, and the movies that we watch and the things that we experience, all of us leads us to, as a male at times, this vision of something bigger than a car that actually gets you from point A to point B, right? So if I go back in my own life, I think back to my teenage years, the first vehicle that I had, I guess I got my driver's license in 1986. My first car was a 70s era Camaro, right? So I had the 70s era Camaro that was a 6-cylinder and not an 8. And when you push the gas, instead of going, rah, it just, it didn't kind of work. It was the hand-me-down car, but it had this dream. The outside looked like that elusive Camaro, but inside it kind of had some engine issues. But as a kid, you're thinking, man, this is it. My identity is in this car. This is so cool. This is part of what life's about. And I got the cool car, which will ultimately lead to the cool girl, right? But I didn't even have that car by the time I met Mary Jo. But all these emotions from TV and film and marketing blend into your head, right? And maybe you want to capture some of those dreams back again. So there came a day about 5 years ago where the movie Transformers came out. And in the first Transformer movie, Bumblebee was a new Camaro. It was the new Camaro. It was the retro rebuilt Camaro that would transform your life and protect you, right, in the movie, right? So they demoed it in there. So I saw the movie and I'm like, what car is that? That's the new Camaro, right? So you have this new car that's featured in there. So I signed up to be on the email list so I could learn everything you ever wanted about the new Camaro that was about to come out, right? So I got the new Camaro screensaver that was going to be there. So I put it on my screen so I could visualize this Camaro that I someday might have, right? So then the Camaros actually start to be released, and in early 2010, they released it to coincide with the second filming of Transformers. They actually released it and timed it in that way so that the vehicles would come out right at that time. So of course, all these emotions are building up in me. I remember my childhood. I remember that car that I had. I remember what the movies depicted about this vehicle, the Camaro. I've looked at this marketing for a couple of years as they've talked about how the designer designed it and the drivetrain and the stuff that I don't even understand, but sounds really cool, right? So of course, I've got to go to the showroom and check out the Camaro. So you get in there and they have all the lights on and it's like, oh, right? So you go there and you show up and they're talking to you about it. Man, this is cool. This is one of the first Camaros that's here in Orange Park. You know that? You want that car, don't you? And there's other people that are going to be here shortly. If you don't buy this car right now, that car will be out the door. I said, well, how much off the sticker price are you going to make? No, if you want this car, you got to pay above the sticker price because it is one of the first Camaros. And if you get it today, you'll be able to drive it to the movie theater and watch the release of Transformers 2. You'll be the envy of all your friends. What did I do? I bought the Camaro, right? I was at a place in my life where I could afford it. It wasn't going to put us into debt. But to me, if there was honesty in it, there was more than just the object of buying a vehicle to put from point A to point B. There was an element deep down within there where my identity might be tied in that experience that I was envisioning as part of the overall ownership of that vehicle. So of course, you get the car and then you drive over there and everybody's coming out of the movie theater and you're like, got to show you my car, man. This is cool. You see this? Isn't it so cool? Isn't it so neat? And then a couple years later, or maybe not even a couple years later, maybe a week later, you get out and all of a sudden you have those payments that start to come in, right? Like, dang, I didn't know I have to pay for this thing, And then it's just a car. And it doesn't take very long before something's spilled in it or something, gets dirty or it gets scratched or the outside happens. And then you come to that realization that it's just a car, but then there's this sense of guilt and remorse that's maybe mixed in with it because, man, I overspent on that. Why did I go buy that? Why did I do that? Man, all I really need is a car to get from point A to point B. The resources maybe could have spent much better in another way. So even I, who tries to consider every purchase through the lens of worship, sometimes fall into this trap, right? So that's why I say money really is a measure of what we value and ends up being a measure of worship. How many of us in this room today maybe find ourselves in some significant credit card debt, not because of the loss of a job, not because of a sickness, but because there were things we want, needed, and desired that we felt would fulfill some need in our life to make us feel better, to give us some sense of identity, be it shoes or a flat screen TV or a dress or a car or a couch or you name it. And now we're paying for that stuff. And all we feel about it was, man, why did I fall into that trap? Yet marketing continues to tell us over and over again that this is the life that you're supposed to live. No one wants to suck you in, but what really it is a trick from the devil to get you to worship that stuff so that you don't have the time, attention, or resources to give to God so that we can advance the kingdom of God. He wants to leave us distracted so that he could keep us from fulfilling the God-given legacy of our heart of having that true and whole worship where we're satisfied in God and God alone, that becomes a spring of living water that is without guilt. So Jesus is introducing this real thing to her, and he's using this mountaintop analogy, or she actually brings up the mountaintop, but we perpetuate those kinds of things in our hearts and minds in our society today. See, what happens is marketing tells us that we can fill the voids in our life by more, and more, always leaving unsatisfied, guilty, ashamed, often broke, busted, and disgusted, right? And let me be honest, the church perpetuates this myth. The modern day church that we have created perpetuates this consumer-driven mentality, and it is not biblical at all. We've actually created a worship distortion within our fellowships that needs to be broken.